I have my fall cup. Never enough coffee. Hello, readers. Welcome to my channel, Books, Ink, and Paper. I'm so happy that I am talking about Halloween horror-y things. I just can't even tell you. It's creepy to some degree how much I love horror and creepiness. Like, it's just nuts. Nevertheless, here I am. And today's video is about maybe the birth of that affinity for horror and creepiness and kind of where I am now with it in terms of what I love the most. When I was a child, I had to have been pretty young, and I clearly remember my sisters, I think, were the catalyst for this. They were the catalyst for a lot of things because my sisters were 12 and 14 when I was born, so they were much older. They would watch a show, a series, a soap opera, if you will, called Dark Shadows. And Dark Shadows featured Barnabas Collins, who was a vampire who came back to the Collins family after being estranged for a long time. They lived in Collinwood, and it was a small community, and it was just, I don't know, I just couldn't get enough of it. So I continued to watch it every day after school in the basement of our house, because which was, finished. I mean, we had a couch down there and TV and all that stuff. My mom didn't love Dark Shadows at all, and so we would always watch it downstairs so that she wouldn't have to watch or listen to it. And they published paperbacks about Dark Shadows and about Barnabas Collins. I was there. I think I still have one left that somehow survived my moves and my different, experiences in life. But I would love to get my hands back on those. I absolutely remember that being creepy, but yet I couldn't get enough of it. Fast forward to 1971 or 72. I may have mentioned this before for sure, but I was visiting my aunt and uncle's house. My cousins were older, they were at college or somewhere, and I was staying in one of their rooms. There's some discussion we've had recently about which one of them had this book, and they both think that they did. So it's very possible it was both, either or. But I was staying in their room, and I found a book that I was simply fascinated with, and I started to read it, and it was just so creepy, and yet I couldn't put it down. So much so that I told my parents that I was sick so that I didn't have to come out and, socialize and be in the yard and do whatever I would normally do with my family so that I could finish this book. I feel bad about that now in retrospect, but it is what it is. So that book is The Exorcist by William Peter Blatty. Yeah, I read The Exorcist when I was about 10 or 11, 10, I think, 10 years old, because I was really super young, and I was a pretty accelerated reader at that point. And oh my gosh, this was, I just could not put it down. I remember this being one of the first books that just was indelible for me. And I couldn't wait for the movie to come out. Of course, it did come out, and I couldn't go see it because my parents were never going to allow that to happen. I do remember, though, watching the news and seeing that the lines in Chicago for the theater for this particular movie were around the block and back again. People were getting in fights, and crowds were just out of control in different major cities of the United States. And it was like this big phenomenon, much like Jaws would be later, which is another horrifying book that I loved, couldn't get enough of the creep and the horror, couldn't wait to see it on the big screen. Fast forward, I'm in high school, and it's re-released, and I am determined now that I'm going to go see it. So I get my boyfriend to agree to take me to this movie. He's very reluctant. He does not like horror. I say, it's going to be fine. It's not that bad. I've read the book. It was pretty bad. I mean, I have to admit, it was pretty bad. In fact, I was so upset by this movie, the movie version of it coming to life in front of me, that I actually did like keep looking away. And he kept telling me, "You have to watch this. You brought me here." He was not a terribly nice guy at times. I actually slept with my mom for 2 nights after. In fact, I could have slept with my mom for months if my dad hadn't come in on the third day and said, "This isn't happening again. I need to sleep in my own bed." Can you imagine? My dad was in my little twin bed in my 70s decor. Oh my gosh. It was stunningly terrifying. Years later, my ex-husband is remotely working, and I come home for a couple of months, I guess, between where we were going to be stationed, and it's on TV, but I have no idea because I'm watching the Olympics, and my parents keep coming into this room I'm sleeping in, and they keep saying, what are you watching? How are you? Is everything okay?" And I'm like, "Yeah, everything's fine. Why wouldn't it be?" And then I realized later that they knew that The Exorcist was on. They were afraid I was watching it and then I would stay up all night. I can watch it now without any issue. I do not have nightmares. I love it. I watch it. I watch the series that's come from it. I watch the sequels, which, honest to goodness, are not as good. I watch everything related to this and to demon possession because I'm somewhat obsessed with it as a genre. My sneaking around reading this book caused this lifelong kind of connection to this book. In fact, I am so sad that William Peter Blatty died. I am determined to reread it this season. I do reread it every couple of years, honest to goodness. I fly through it still. I still love it. I still feel like, oh, I'm in my place with this favorite book of mine. Not even kidding. So this was the catalyst for my reading life, anyway, that I recall. And then Dark Shadows was the catalyst for my sort of viewing joy in scary movies and shows and things. Another one I love and I reread pretty frequently is called Harvest Home, and it's by Thomas Tryon. And this too came out in 72. So I read it as a pretty young girl. Um, this one spurred my love of haunted houses. I can't say there wasn't a haunted house book that I liked a lot before this book. I don't know, but this one in particular was like the one that stayed with me. And I also reread this every few years or so. There's this place in New England called Cornwall Combe, and it looks like no one has ever touched it. It's kind of like it kind of reminds me of Stars Hollow in the Gilmore Girls in the sense of how it's developed. It does not remind me of Stars Hollow in the actual book. So Ned and Beth Constantine decide they're going to buy a home in Cornwall Combe, and the neighbors seem just so lovely. And then they discover that there's a horror in this community that they had never imagined. I loved it. I, again, love rereading it. I have it on ebook and I need to get a physical copy of that one. They're harder to come by, but Thomas Tryon was pretty popular. And I think he still lives on in the land of 70s literature. There was a period of time where I was a big fan of Anne Rice. I read a good number of her novels as well. And I truly, still to this day, The Mayfair Witches remains my favorite trilogy of hers. I have not reread that recently, and it is pretty chunky. So, will I get back and forth to it? I don't know, but I will say that I do love and kind of Harvest Home too kind of sparked my love of books about witches and covens and cults and movements like that. Rosemary's Baby is another one that kind of falls in that genre of really creepy stuff. Rosemary's Baby, I saw the movie first with my sisters, who obviously weren't supervising me in the same way I would maybe supervise my grandchildren now, because I wouldn't let them read or watch any of this stuff. But anyway, Rosemary's Baby was one that I watched with them. And another one I remember watching with them is called Hush, Hush, Sweet Charlotte with Betty Davis. And I do remember that there was a scene where they did close my eyes so that I couldn't see what happened. And I found out later that it was a head going down the stairs. Uh, if you've not seen Hush Hush Sweet Charlotte, it's a pretty creepy one too, but it's an older movie, so it doesn't have the modern day creep factor. One of the things I'm most looking forward to, and you're probably not surprised by this, is The Exorcist Believer is being released very soon. I may have to go see it by myself. My daughter may be able to go with me. It's just a question of scheduling because she would go. We have both watched a lot of horror movies together over the years, and she's got a real constitution for it, much more so than my oldest. And I don't know that my son really cares about horror. And I'm pretty sure my daughter-in-law is a no, a hard no on that. But I am really, really excited about The Exorcist coming out. Another book I read recently that was pretty creepy, I have to admit, it was the gore factor for me, because otherwise it's a hilarious book as well. It's the most strange book I've read in a really long time, and that's How to Sell a Haunted House by Grady Hendrix. He is hilarious, and also he just has these bizarre plots that he creates. And in How to Sell a Haunted House, it is about a brother and sister who have come together after their parents both die. Their mother was into puppets, so those of you who have a puppet aversion or love puppets, this is the book for you. But they definitely went through some things that were described so in such a detailed way. And both my daughter Megan and I listened to it. And I think listening to those passages made it more intense than if I had read it. I physically read Horror Store, which is the IKEA version of horror by Grady Hendrix, where some things happen in a closed up store that is definitely modeled after IKEA. That one was not as scary to me, but again, I read the physical copy of it. So would it have been different if I was listening to it? I don't know. I do appreciate the audio versions of certain horror because it just makes it scarier. Paul Tremblay could also scare me, not every time, but A Head Full of Ghosts, back to the demon possession kind of framework. A Head Full of Ghosts was pretty frightening to me. I remember reading that during a hurricane, which was doubly frightening. So I have liked his, and Survivor Song I really appreciated. It is a horrifying topic, and so for some people that was the issue with it in terms of being horror. I think that's all. I'm reading some new horror authors to me this season, and I'm also reading a few that are authors that I've read a number of times. So that's kind of a synopsis about why I love horror novels so much and how that began for me and how it's continued over the years. If you have any great recommendations for horror that you think will really, creep me out, bring them forward. This is your mission for me today and for the next few weeks. Tell me about all the horror that you've read. It doesn't matter how old it is. I don't mind it if it's, written obviously in the 60s, 70s, whenever it is. But I absolutely can't wait to hear what your recommendations are, because I do reread a lot, but I'm ready for some new horror. And I do have some new ones on my shelf, as you've seen in the video that I posted the other day. But I am here for it. The more horror-y, the better. Thanks for joining me today. Thanks for being with me during my little walk down the childhood memory lane. I truly will never forget. You know how there's certain pictures in your mind that you just can't ever forget? I hope I will never forget that TV in the basement of my house in Illinois watching Dark Shadows. I cannot imagine not remembering that. It was so critical for me to get down the stairs in time to watch that show every day. I think it was on at 3 or 3:30. It was just incredible. I'm not kidding. Okay, guys, thanks again. Love your views, your comments, your shares. I appreciate it. I am creeping up to 1,000 subscribers. I'm going to try to figure out a way to push me over the edge. Yeah, I'm going to try to figure it out. But if you know anybody you think would love this content, please feel free to share it with them and encourage them to subscribe. And as always, happy reading. Bye. Cheers.